Troy guy, man. Make sure y'all subscribe or use a broke bitch, man.
Yes, hopping that way, we get to rolling. Ayy, bitch, you ain't gang, don't even know him. For the 808 sitting, I'm finna go in. How to run the bell, like where you going? Hopping the way, we get to rolling. Ayy, bitch, you ain't gang, don't even know him. For the 808 sitting, I'm finna go in. How to run the bell, like where you going?
Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's me, JoJo's, it's your boy Trey Guy, and welcome back to the channel. And today, we're reacting to why JoJo's OPs Matter by the man, the Shuckmeister. You know, shout out to him. I already liked the video, you know what I mean. But yeah, let's get straight into it, man.
There are typically a few different ways that a series can build a brand. Usually, a definitive aesthetic is the easiest way to draw an audience's attention, which is why you see so many series try to emulate what's popular at the time. This makes it seem like some shows are on a cookie-cutter production line, and the difference in quality might be more difficult to discern. This isn't exclusive to Western or Japanese animation, or just animation in general. Shows for the longest time have always needed a way to grab the attention of an audience and distill down the themes, tone, and style of a series in about 30 to 90 seconds.
Minions are real! I have seen one! I have touched one with my own hands!
And one of the most common ways to achieve that goal is by having an opening theme song. The evolution of opening themes derived from musical theater, in which the overture was meant to be a medley of the most prominent songs of the entire show, showing the theme's tone and feel of what the play was about. Television used the idea of an opening theme to instantly grab people's attention. Think back to how many theme songs are just instantly recognizable. These will stick with an audience far longer than most specific dialogue from the shows they're even watching. Openings can be short, long, relevant or not, but typically they maintain one thing: consistency. It's fairly uncommon for an opening to a television show in the West to change, because that risks losing the factor of recognizability with the audience. This usually comes down from a corporate standard and not a lack of creativity. Most productions will use the same song, but may change scenes being shown between different seasons. Then enter Japanese anime, where openings can be as good, and in some cases better, than the show you're watching. Anime openings are one of the major draws to watching it in the first place, since they manage to suck you in with typically very upbeat and engaging themes.
I will say, if the opening's better than the show, I mean, fuck, like, that's tragic.
Specifically from the shonen variety, tends to focus on maximizing the hype aspect of a production with the opening. Some shows that I grew up with on 4Kids, like Pokemon, Dragon Ball, and yes, even One Piece, attempted to capture that draw, energy, and appeal of the source while putting an Americanized spin on them, often changing the lyrics and meaning, while the music itself still fits the appeal of the 90s cartoon.
The only thing I see at WWE, the WWB One Piece shit is that shit with Sanji and he's holding the sucker instead of cigarette. That's just gross.
Tunes airing at the time.
Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum.
I guess the best thing you can say is just that anime openings hit differently. However, that doesn't mean openings can't fall into, well, being repetitive, trite dog water. Whatever's popular at the time tends to lead the trends. However, I've always found myself loving series that rebuff the established trends by taking their OPs in directions that help them stand out from the crowd. And in my mind, there's no series that does this better than JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo openings are some of the craziest in all of anime for many reasons, and since you clicked on this video, you're probably expecting me to elaborate in glorious detail. Someone needs to, because JoJo openings are something special compared to your typical anime's opening. And even if you're not acquainted with the series, viewers can still come to enjoy and appreciate them. This is because David Production, the studio that produces JoJo, had enlisted another studio known as Kamikaze Doga to make half of the openings for them. And Kamikaze Doga did something incredibly interesting with them. JoJo's original openings happen to be 3D CGI. Oh, wait, it's actually good CG? Nani? Yes, it turns out a studio filled with dedicated 3D animators can actually create better CGI than the director of Golden Kamui. Who could have thought? But in all seriousness, the 3D JoJo openings are unlike anything around. See, the author of JoJo's, Hirohiko Araki, has a unique art style, to say the least. Some of these designs have had trouble being adapted into 2D before. However, to see these characters fully rendered with fluid movements is a joy beyond none other, a gold experience that is made in heaven. So let me briefly explain and go over what each part's openings accomplish. For simplicity's sake, I'll be analyzing in chronological order, and not the full songs, only what aired on television. Starting with part 1, Phantom Blood, Sonochi no Sadame comes out of the gate swinging with the best foot forward. This song was sung by the iconic Hirokai Tommy Tominaga. This opening really drives home the relationship between Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando, especially with the title itself, Sonochi no Sadame, which translates into the fate of that blood. But the relationship is punctuated with lines like, twin stars streaking through the heavens stir the surface of light and darkness. Throbbing hearts burn as if aflame, the pulse which beats forth from their palms, the courage which runs through their veins. But besides the lyrical composition, each transition in this opening seamlessly flows from one scene to the next as the music builds to its crescendo. There are plenty of analysis videos that go over every little detail and reference in the series in the opening. I've even done some before myself. I don't really want to retread that ground with this video. I want to talk about the structure of these openings and how they say something profound. And that's what you get from the first moment when you open up the literal pages of time as they rewind through Jolene, Giorno, Josuke, Jotaro, and Joseph until Jonathan gives his moment to shine. And you see the real rivalry between this character and Dio grow and develop until this bombastic ending. And the ending itself, being the mask's burial at sea, makes this opening feel almost mythical, as if it was some sort of legend, while being a direct reference to the fate of the characters at the end of the park. Being the first opening, there's a lot of big and stilted animations here and there, but it's not too noticeable, so overall, it's a beautiful way to open up the series. Part 2, Battle Tendency, introduced a new opening, Bloody Stream, by the always entertaining Coda. This is where JoJo openings decide to take a bit more of a fabulous trend when it comes to how they establish themselves and what aesthetic limits they decide to push. Right from the first few seconds of this opening, a more confident, easygoing tone is established through Joseph doing his Chad stride onto the scene. And this is the perfect way to reflect the comedic nature of Part 2 when compared to Part 1. This opening goes wild with color contrast, and even the fluid movements are blended with 2D animation where it fits. And with it, you're introduced to so much more of the cast than the previous opening had. As the last was focused primarily on Jonathan and Dio, this opening manages to include, however brief it may be, characters like Caesar, Lisa, the Pillarmen, Speedwagon, Smokey, Stroheim, and the rest of the cast. The opening is a lot more extravagant with the posing, something the Coda openings are just very well known for. Not only is the visual foreshadowing even more explicit in this opening than before, but the lyrics of the song once again translate to the message being portrayed. From the silent depth, the pillars awake from their ages-long slumber. Crimson blood summons the valorous to stand up. Undying bonds of honor arrive. Take hold of them. Joseph is stepping into the role of his grandfather, a bit unwillingly because of the imminent threat of the Pillarmen. I really love the reference to Crimson Blood, the blood that awakens my masters, but also is the bloodline of the Joestars and the Zeppellis fighting the Stone Masks once again. And I can't stress enough how much of a banger this song is. Like, I really need to do a ranking video of all the openings based on how likely I would be to put them on if someone passed me the aux cord. Bloody Stream was the first opening to push forward the unique hodgepodge of design motifs, and that's why it certainly stands out. Speaking of standing, we're about to stand proud with the third opening from Part 3, Stardust Crusaders, with one of the most iconic characters from anime and manga, Jotaro Kujo. Performed by Jin Hashimoto, this opening wants to hype everyone up to the maximum, as this part was where JoJo's big break really came from. It's hard to understate how influential Stardust Crusaders was to the series, with not only the change in power system, but the longer narrative structure that really felt like you were on a journey with
because like I'm so this show looks great, but like, man, I don't know. Man, this show looks good, man.
Characters. And this opening captures that perfectly. Before the lyrics even get started, you're reminded of the generational journey that led us to this point. Once again, this opening heavily leans into the posing and the references from the original source material by having Jotaro's signature point and the reveal of Star Platinum sync to the music. Stand Proud was really detailed in retelling the first half of Part 3 through its visuals, as it leads from each story beat to the next. There's a slow kind of walk as the characters are sizing up to face their foe until the beat drops and each of the Crusaders
Who's the black
breaks out
dude,
their
bro? I
stance,
don't think
fighting
anyone ever
in their
told me
own
in the
unique
comments,
styles.
bro.
As their enemies, the tarot
the nigga,
cards
man?
and sound effects fly across the screen. See, what helps with these early openings is the fact that they're synced not only to the music, but also the lyrics being sung. Lyrically, Stand Proud tells a similar tale like the openings before it, filling the role of your bloodline. And now these gathering stardust, summoned in the awakening of a catastrophe. But to some extent, because this opening appeals to more of a mainstream audience, it sort of generalizes some of the lyrics and tends to make them a bit simpler. Break you down, break you down, break you down. Let these fists fly free with the hollow vision, stand proud. I actually don't mind this too much. For starters, the English is really great, and it narratively fits JoJo's solutions to most problems in the story. Stardust Crusaders was so long that it was actually gifted 2 openings, one to represent the global journey and one to represent the endeavors in Egypt. And that's why we've got Sonochi no Kizuku, or End
how long
of
is
the
Stardust
World,
Crusaders?
performed by a culmination of everyone, Tommy, Koda, and Jin. Though Tommy is more of a side dish than the main course. But bringing back all of the previous artists is absolutely warranted because it felt like a celebration of what JoJo's was up until this point. Sonochi no
So all the
Kizuku
artists
is
came back
a
from
wonderful
the old
remix of
OPs?
the old and new, whilst maintaining that typical shonen action tone that JoJo was known for. The opening builds up to a point very slowly with ominous ticking clocks before it breaks out into a tracking shot featuring all of the main characters, and then puts them in various situations and encounters during the events of the second half of the part. The visuals of this opening are not only better than before, but they merge the silhouette style from Bloody Stream with the iconography of Stand Proud. The lyrics balance the opening perfectly. A growing inferno scorches their destination. The power of the gods has been assembled. Their story has begun. Their time is running out. They will finish this. They won't stop. Crusaders. References to the events of the story are one thing, in making an opening stand out, but Sonoshi no Kizuku does go beyond that. I haven't mentioned up until this point, but the standard finale of each part ends with a sound effects opening, where sound effects from the anime are inserted into the opening to match what's going on. Sound effect openings are just the pinnacle of what is enjoyable about listening to these songs. However, this opening not only does that, but goes above and beyond by inserting the antagonist Dio into scenes to show how he affected everything throughout this entire opening, which makes going back to the original opening just such a cool experience, so you can see where everything leads. But it doesn't stop there. Dio is such a menacing threat that he himself can even stop the opening at will. And I just gotta say, when I first saw this, I lost my mind. The amount of dedication
I did too, bro, because that is insane. Like, the little bit I know about JoJo's, is that Dio's a zesty ass nigga, and he pretty much does what the fuck he wants, bro. That nigga Dio's different, and the fact that you can stop a whole opening, bro, like, what, man. That's fire though, how
entire opening,
he
which makes
changed
going back
the-
to the original opening just such a cool experience.
showing
So you
how
can
he's
see where
changing the
everything
shit.
leads. But it doesn't
'cause
stop there.
I never realized
Dio
it
is
when I
such
first
a
watched it. Like, cause I was just listening to the song, I was like really confused. I was like, "What? This the same shit, ain't it?" And then this happened.
menacing threat.
So like going
that
back and
he
looking at
himself
that,
can
cause I
even
never really
stop
noticed
the
it.
opening at will. And I just gotta say, when I first saw this,
fire.
I lost my mind. The amount of dedication that everyone put into this just blew me away. But here's where our story takes a little bit of a sad turn, as Kamikaze Doga had finally grown from their humble beginnings to become one of the
Batman
few
Ninja.
powerhouses of nearly entirely 3D modeled anime. So they went on to create a movie about Batman being a ninja, known as Samurai Superhero. But with the sudden change in the order of things, they were no longer available to work on the openings at that point. And this marks the beginning of David Production developing the openings in-house. This was a shock to many fans when it first happened, myself included. But at the very least, they delivered certified classic after certified classic, especially with their first entry into the 2D era. When you think of Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, you think of a crazy, noisy, bizarre town known as Moriocho. And that's exactly what the dude
bro. I like
provided
this one.
with this opening.
I like
it's also
this
funny
one.
because DU, Diamond, is unbreakable.
fuck with
I don't know,
this
I
one.
like that little bit of providence. A certain change of musical tone, especially compared to the first three parts, is evident from the very first moment you see these characters on
that's
screen.
just-
This
that's just
opening
how-
was something of a refresh for the series, as part 4 had a bit of a slower start when compared to the other parts, and that's coming off of the big build-up at the end of part 3. And the slice of life tone happens to be really evident in this opening, because this seems like the first one that isn't expressly trying to hype you up. This one just features the main characters going about their lives, striking poses, some of which became prolific memes. And that's something I love about this opening in particular, that it manages to evolve with the character as the story is going along. The groovy disco vibe that it gives is just asking you to lay back, chill out, and get accustomed to being a visitor in this town. And that's expressly clear through lyrics like this. There's no limit to each new encounter. Everything's so ordinarily bizarre. The time we have flies flowing free as we bicker away, dancing all while in this crazy, noisy, bizarre town. Oddly enough, in lieu of a sound effects opening, there's an EDM opening that takes place during the fight against Akira Otoshi. While it's certainly unique and bizarre,
Yeah,
I
that
personally
threw
don't
me
like
off.
this one. It just doesn't hit as hard
was
as
okay.
it could have. In fact, I don't think this song is particularly
okay.
suited for an EDM remix, though that may just come down to personal preference. However, I can't
Yeah,
deny
don't
how
tell
much
me
of
that
an
it's a EDM shit in
absolute
the
jam
comments.
this song
Yeah,
was,
say I was
and I'm
fucking
not
with
ashamed
EDM
to admit
though.
that it was my
People I
alarm
said
for
so
about
they
3
enjoyed
years.
EDM.
Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town hides
People
a
in the
lot of
comments, man.
secrets in its
Shout out to you
opening
in the
about the
comments
plot
also.
and
I
maintaining
keep
that
thinking the
generalized
camera's over
vibrato
here, and I be
of the
forgetting I got
part.
the fucking
Diamond is
webcam.
Unbreakable was also long enough.
Shout out to you. God, I did the shit again. I did it again. Shout out to you. If you're in the comments and shit. I literally just did that. There we go. It won't fucking start. Oh my god, bro. This is
More
I don't know what
multiple
this video
opening,
is.
and that's primarily because the part breaks very evenly into 3 narrative acts. And the second opening happened to be, at least prior to the most recent opening, the most controversial
this one right
Chase,
here.
performed by Bata. This opening is the most polarizing for one major
This
reason.
one right here.
Contrast. It clashes so hard against the appeal of Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town. And I get that's the point, but it's entirely understandable for many fans, myself included, why we dislike it. It takes a very metal
Oh, they don't
approach
like
to
it?
arguably the darkest act of Part 4, and that's when I realized its true purpose. Part 4 is telling a story through the opening, which is kind of just mind-blowing when you think about it. Chase is meant to be the darkest opening because technically in a 3-act narrative structure, the second act is always when the heroes are at their low point. While I think Chase audibly feels more like a Naruto opening, it visually still maintains the JoJo appeal. Chase is very edgy with its lyrics, and that comes as no surprise considering how it's being sung. My most precious thing seems about to be stolen by a demon that's burrowed into my everyday life, with the sharpness of piercing arrows. These colliding hearts are a thing of beauty. Chase can be both about Josuke chasing after Kira and Kira chasing after his next victim, which is really nice to see the duality
I don't know who
really
Kira
cleanly
is,
embraced. See, it seems like the hipster answer to call Chase your favorite opening, but it just proves the point that even the least JoJo opening can still be pretty good. Great Days
Yeah, nah,
is the
that-
final
that
opening for
one's
part
still
4, and it's
crazy.
another culmination of everything this part has been building up to. Great Days is a monument
hey,
that
don't
builds
play that
off
loud
of
ass-
what
that
was
loud ass
established
fucking-
by Sono Chino
okay.
Kizuku. Originally
That shit was
performed by
loud,
Karen
bro,
Aoki
like-
and Daisuke Hasegawa. It also has a unit version that brings in Tommy, Koda, Jin, the Do, and Bata all into one extravagant finale. Great Days, like the name implies, is meant to remind you of all the great places you've been to, the people you've met, and the things you've done in this little town of Morio. Also, as a side note from the guy who played all the openings on piano, it's kind of awesome to have a song in F sharp major. You don't see that
Why
every
he got
day.
backwards
Great Days
waves,
not
huh?
piano.
Yeah,
It's kind
hold
of
on.
brings back all
What
the
is that?
previous artists,
That
but
shit's
also
nasty.
have
What is
see
that?
that every day. Great Days not only brings
Why you got backwards waves? That shit gross.
back all of the previous artists, but also has various alternate versions that really help define it as its own. It strikes loudly with the passion of the Duane gang as they close the walls around
Only
Kira.
versions hit.
But Kira's not out of it yet. He's just as strong as Dio when it comes to interrupting the openings, and he uses the power of his stand
Rewind
to
the whole
rewind
shit.
what
That-
you've seen.
that was fire.
Again, when this happened, this was absolutely wild.
That was
Now
fire.
the precedent has gone forward of the villains having to interrupt the opening near the end of the part. Lyrically, Great Days reminds you of the spirit of humanity that this town brings out. Let the voice of love take you higher. Wait this gathering power, go beyond even time. 1999, Bizarre Summer. This city threw on revolving courage, Great Days. Supplemented by the constant chanting of break down, break down. This pushes hard against the force of evil that has been plaguing the town. Part 4 showed that even with the 2D openings, David Pro's directors were competent enough to continue the spirit of what was originally established by Kamikaze Doga, while making them feel unique, even compared to your typical anime's opening. Golden Wind continued the trend of using 2D openings, but unlike before, Coda was brought back to announce Bloody Stream 2. Fan expectations were at an all-time high when this project called Fighting Gold was announced, but little was known about it until the actual release of Part 5. Having been an avid enjoyer of JoJo Fridays at the time, it was certainly not what I expected. Coda maintained a minor key, Bloody Stream being in C minor, while Fighting Gold was in D minor. However, these small changes make a huge difference in tone. C minor correlates to E flat major, and D minor correlates to F major. If you know a little bit about music theory, you might know where I'm going with this. Coda is really brilliant at taking these commonly understood to be bright and positive sounds and turning them into more dark and serious themes. But while Bloody Stream does have a lighthearted tone, visually and through its instrumentation, Fighting Gold is a little different. The immediate comparison is that of a Bond opening, and the visuals punctuate that feeling to the maximum. Fighting Gold is kind of like Stand Proud or Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town, in which its visuals are very generalized. However, I think even more so than those openings. But that isn't a bad thing. An opening can communicate each character's personality and ability given the position they are in, and somehow it manages to foreshadow a good chunk of the part. This is why Fighting Gold is just so different and so unique even when it comes to JoJo openings. It is not only a masterclass in visual silhouette storytelling, but it lyrically establishes the strongest motif in all of Part 5. It's as if you're being crushed by the heavy will of fate that holds your dreams in bondage. Fighting Gold. Only those who believe their own path will eventually shine until their lives burn out. The chains of fate binding these characters to their destiny is really something to appreciate in this opening, considering how Golden Wind is contextualized around fate as a narrative device. Of all the 2D openings, I was the most impressed in this one as an overall package. Since Part 5 narratively is split into two even halves, it would only make sense for a second opening to dawn our ears. Daisuke Hasegawa returns to bring us Ryurimono no Requiem, or Traitor's Requiem. Not only is Requiem a fitting name, as the half of this part revolves around the pursuit of the Requiem arrow, but traditionally a Requiem derives from the Roman Catholic Church, as a mass to repose the souls of the dead. Composers have implemented this idea of respect for the dead and the coming to rest of those souls in music for centuries. Benjamin Britten's War Requiem stands out to me as one I saw performed live while I was at university. Requiems bring forth a tone of thematic elements, but are usually anchored in religious respect and influence. The slow build-up at the beginning leads into a fast recap of what the gang has been through, and dives into references of chapter covers while placing focus on each member of the gang. The tone builds around the antagonist and swells into the realization of what they are. These feelings of fear drown them out with rage. From the day I swore to turn my back on the devil. When your body perishes, does your prayer disappear as well? Hell no. It's the beginning of the Golden Wind. It's obvious to most readers that Araki himself certainly brings a level of respect towards Christianity in his stories, and he's made it the focal point of parts 5 through 7. And this Requiem balances the dangerous dance between the characters and the devil as they engage throughout the part. All this leads into by far the best ending to any JoJo opening in the history of ever. Endings. There are alternate versions of what happens in Traitor's Requiem, where the JoJo is so strong, he's able to skip past part of the opening. However, when Giorno accomplishes his goal, he actually takes the opening back from Diavolo. This, once again, was just mind-blowing because it took what our expectations were.
So
that
that's
Diavolo
what
would take over the opening,
I
and
feel
then
like I
turned it on its head by having Giorno take back the opening. This is just insane.
Yeah,
and while
like,
instrumentally it's a bit different, and I would say a little bit weaker compared to your traditional anime opening,
fire,
it just proves the
like,
point I've been making in this video
he
so far.
took the opening.
JoJo openings are not your traditional anime openings. They
like,
push the envelope on what you think could
I
be
never
possible.
I never realized like how really like deep they. Well, I mean, I'm not really into the show, but if you're into the show, like, did you know like it gets this deep? Like, I mean, I feel like you had to know some, but like, did you know like all of this? Like all of this? There's no way, cause like this is crazy.
In
now
the
I'm curious,
of
like,
animation
do other
and rhythm.
openers
After going
do
through
this?
each opening in extensive
Or is this
detail,
just a
I'm sure
JoJo's
you
thing?
can see now that these
Like, or
openings
like,
just
y'all
don't
think-
feel like
Let me put it. Yeah, I think more anime are like trying to do this in the future. You know, I don't know. Let's just check it out. Maybe like fucking Makima taking control of the opening. That should be fire. That should
pop
be tough.
songs
That should be
tagged
tough.
onto the production. They have a genuine purpose relating to the story, characters, themes, and references. Stone Ocean saw the reintroduction of 3D openings now that Kamikaze Doga was finished with their other major projects. And I have a whole separate video delving into that opening that's linked in the top right-hand corner if you want to check that out. In some ways, this opening felt like a return to form, being technically brilliant in its animation. Now we get to the point of why I made this video in the first place. I've had many criticisms so far with how Netflix has been handling the release of JoJo's sixth part, Stone Ocean. And as egregious as the batch releases are, one of the casualties that no one expected would be the lack of a new opening for the second batch. Yes, Netflix and David Pro waiting 9 months between batches was not even enough time to give us a new opening. Oh wait, I'm sorry. We got a version 2 opening that changed 10 seconds of animation at the end. Don't get me wrong, I love the opening, and I think it's a banger. 3D CGI work from Kamikaze Doga is amazing, and the musical prowess of Kishida Kyodan and the Akaboshi Rockets really outdid themselves. But prolonging the use of the first opening through the second batch really shows the cracks in not only how it was marketed to us, but also establishes a worrying precedent for Netflix release of the third batch coming
Netflix ain't been giving JoJo love like that, yo. Like, didn't the new season just drop? Like, they ain't been promoting that shit, like, at all. Like, at all. Like, I haven't seen anything. Like, bro.
First off, I think we should start with the title of the opening itself. Stone Ocean's opening is titled Stone Ocean, which is also the same title as the first episode. At the very least, call it something else to differentiate it. Unless Netflix thinks the average binge watcher's IQ is so low that you can call the first episode, the opening, and the part the same thing without them questioning it. You could literally have called it something like Breakout, and that would have done wonders to not only give it more of an identity, but also keep in line with the goals of Jolene through the first 5 episodes.
Like,
at least when Golden Wind titled Giorno...
When you say it like that, when you put it like that, when you put it like that, okay, because I was like, that's a little petty, but like, nah, yeah, you're right.
Theme, Il Vento d'Oro, which literally means the golden wind. It had the decency to put it in Italian, bibbidi bobbidi, and that's not even the opening, it's just the theme from the OST. I've already talked about the importance of foreshadowing the themes and tone of the part through the opening's lyrics and visuals. While Stone Ocean certainly hits the bullseye on the visual storytelling, at least with regards to the first batch, the lyrical composition is to be desired. In previous openings, you had tales of brotherhood, the obsession of finding a murderer, and the willingness to step into the role that your destiny calls you to. The most important message from Stone Ocean's opening is, don't stop beating, don't stop beating, don't stop beating them up. Which, I mean, is totally fine if this was going to be the first opening in a trilogy of 3. That would encompass all of the feelings of Stone Ocean, kind of like what Part 4 did. But no, this is what we got. And probably the worst trend is that this opening makes it into the new batch with a version 2 instead of being an original opening. And I'm going to make a prediction that I pray isn't true, but knowing the show is airing on Netflix, I see this as entirely possible. Look at the difference between version 1 and version 2. In version 1, Jolene is taking a pose away from her father, Jotaro, and walking away on her own path. Through the events of the first batch, we end up with version 2. Jotaro is still in Jolene's mind as someone who rejects her and continues to face away. But having realized she doesn't want to go through the loss of losing him again, she walks toward him to give him an embrace, similar to this volume cover. They also added Savage Garden and the Raining Frogs from Weather Report. A nice reference, to be sure, but now this whole scenario is making me very nervous for the worst timeline. What is the chance that for Batch 3's opening, we'll just get Stone Ocean again, but the last 10 seconds this time will be Jolene turning to face Jotaro, who is facing her back with pride and accomplishment? Something dumb like that. Now, a lot of fans are sanguine enough to give Netflix a chance, thinking that they're going to do something similar like Fighting Gold that aired for 22 episodes of Part 5. That is far too charitable of a view, in my opinion. Fighting Gold, as I mentioned before, was like Stand Proud, somewhat ambiguous enough that it could be used for long stretches of episodes without losing its meaning or form. Stone Ocean's opening Stone Ocean has overstayed its welcome, considering over 90...
Wait, so has the new opening... Wait, when did he make this? 3 months ago? I feel like... Ooh, so he hasn't seen the newest
80%
one.
of the events in the
I
opening
wonder how he
don't
feels about
occur
the
in Batch
newest
2.
one.
Furthermore, Golden Wind's narrative structure is
wonder how he
like
feels about the
Stardust
newest one.
Crusaders, where the events are split into even halves, while Stone Ocean's narrative structure is like Diamond is Unbreakable, where the events are split into thirds. That was the whole reason they justified the Batch release. It's entirely understandable why fans would be upset if there wasn't a new opening featured. But that's not even the worst part about it. At the end of the first batch, we had a sound effects opening. Sound effects openings up until this point were an indication that that would be the last time you heard that opening. So they literally put everything into it to go out with a bang. That happened to give fans a false expectation that a new opening was on the horizon. As I mentioned before, new openings give Stone Ocean the chance to build up hype, especially for a community that was starved for content, waiting such a long time to hear something new. We were not given that chance because Netflix interfered in some capacity with either budgetary or release restrictions. Think about it. Netflix's business model is consume product and get excited for next product. The option to skip intro on Netflix is something that's prolific. It's something I think is a terrible feature. Yes, you give the average binge watcher a faster viewing experience, but at what cost?
It's only good for certain shows. You know what I mean? It's only good for like the fucking New Girl and shit. You know what I mean? Like, shout out to New Girl. If you watch New Girl, the show's fire. But like, I don't need to hear that fucking intro all the time. Just skip it. You feel me? But that shit do be pissing me off when it happens to anime openings. Especially when I was watching Fullmetal Alchemist. I was like, nigga, you really just gonna skip this opening?
Consider
No,
what's
go back.
lost. What was taken from you? Netflix can probably see that a bunch of people are going to skip the opening to begin with, which is something that I never do when watching anime unless the opening is physically making my eardrums bleed. So, this company who's floundering about right now, cutting budgets here and there of most of the shows they're offering, if not outright canning them, probably restricted the amount of Dolan's David Pro would get for their adaptation. Hence why we only got one variation on the original opening. There were 3 whole versions of Trader's Requiem. Time to make a new opening was never the issue, especially since Kamikaze Doga hasn't announced any new projects they're on. Now, from what I've seen of the second batch that I've been watching weekly, which you can too on my Discord server with me, I must admit that the quality of this batch is already looking much better than it was before. The 9-month release schedule certainly gave the production some time to polish the show. However, one of the most apparent budget cuts, or at least indications that the first batch was rushed, was the limited amount of tracks in the OST. This is being somewhat remedied by the second batch, but the OST budget, where the opening often reside, was likely one of the first things on the chopping block, since it effectively is just icing on the cake for any production. Like, even parts of the second batch just strike me as odd. The finale of Limp Bizkit, or Limp Bizkit's CNN Bias Analyzer, ended with a track from Stardust Crusaders. Why doesn't Hermes have her own theme yet? If she did, that would be the perfect place to put it. That might answer why we haven't seen the full OST released anywhere yet. Because if people realize how small it is, they might start asking some questions. Now, a new development that happened during the making of this video was that Netflix randomly announced that the third batch will be releasing December 1st, 2022, only 3 months apart and not 9 like they did between the first and second batch. This brings the whole release schedule of Stone Ocean to 1 year in total. It turns out, when you take a weekly series and spread it across 3 years of batch releases, that doesn't work. Who could have guessed? This actually lines up with the weekly airing, so I'll continue to enjoy my JoJo Fridays like normal. But did Netflix listen to us? No, I really don't think so. Something must have happened behind the scenes which caused Netflix to bend and announce this out of nowhere. That needs more investigation from my end. And while I'm glad it's coming sooner, I think it's too little too late if you wanted to save the hype. Shuckstradamus is predicting no new opening. Considering I'm right 99.7% of the time, I hope this is one of the 0.3% where I'm not.
Yeah,
It
you're
would be a
right.
real shame
You were.
if that's the case. And
You
while
were
this
wrong. You were wrong. How much
whole
else
video
you gonna
doesn't
say?
give anyone at Netflix or David Pro the time to consider why JoJo openings matter, I hope it helps you all understand.
Hey,
All
look at the
this to
Cubans.
say
I
that
mean, we're not
JoJo
Cubans,
openings
but,
are
hey,
very,
tripping.
very important because they have defined this series to an extent most other adaptations don't get. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video. Man, talking about all these openings made me want to rank them, so I'll probably follow up to this video with a quick tier list or something.
Okay. Shout out to shout out to the Shugmeister, man. If you enjoyed the fucking video, subscribe, do all that. It's your boy Trey, I'm out. Peace. See you. Ooh.